Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, where we take an in-depth look at how news from around the world is impacting Taiwan. I'm James Chater. In July, China unveiled new restrictions on the export of gallium and germanium, two rare elements used in the production of semiconductors. It's the latest salvo in escalating trade tensions between the US and China, aimed at slowing the other's ability to produce the world's most advanced technology. But where does Taiwan fit into all this? To find out, we're joined by Jason Hsu, a visiting fellow at Yale University's Paul Tsai China Center. Jason is also a former legislator for Taiwan's opposition Kuomintang, or KMT. Jason, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, James.
To begin, let's look at why these two metals are now front and center of US-China trade tensions. Gallium and germanium are among the rarest elements on Earth. They're used in the production of cutting-edge technology, from chips for electric vehicles, fiber optic cables, and infrared camera lenses. Currently, China alone produces 60% of the world's germanium and 80% of its gallium. Jason, first of all, give us some background on these latest restrictions. Why has China chosen these two very, very specific metals?
Well, industry experts see this pattern as for tit for tat, as a way for China to retaliate on US's export control, which was imposed in October last year, to ban the high-end chips sale to China.
Both gallium and germanium are two important rare earth minerals used to make semiconductors, particularly high-end, high-performance chips. Both gallium and germanium are used in military-used chips, particularly with those in the dual-use technology chips. So this is also a implication of the national security. So Beijing previously has said that it would also seek a unit of different type of retaliation in order to make sure that the containment strategy that was targeted in China could be resolved as well.
So how big a problem will this be for global semiconductor supply chains? You mentioned there the applications of gallium and germanium to the production of higher end chips. What countries, which companies look set to be impacted by these restrictions beyond the US, do you think?
Basically, is the entire supply chain of the semiconductor that would be impacted. And the closest circle is actually the four countries that are produced most semiconductor, and also they're considered the design powerhouse of semiconductor, which is Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and US. So this is not just targeted at US, it's actually targeted at US's allies. So it's saying to those allies that if you join US's containment strategy against China, we will find a way to get back at you. And those economies are smaller than the US. They would obviously be impacted much more directly than US.
And could you talk a little bit about what other usages and applications that these two metals have? You mentioned there's some of the kind of high-end military applications, but are there any other areas where other industries might be impacted by these restrictions as well?
Yeah, this type of minerals, they are used in these high-end chips to produce higher efficiency and lower power consumption. So generally, those are used for advanced technologies such as space technology or artificial intelligence. And most likely, the type of chips that will be used to compute large amount of data at a fast speed. So you could say that in a connected device, telecommunication, or even 5G or 6G mobile that would be impacted. So this is really a way for China to say to the world that we are not deterred by US's export control. We also have a way to retaliate, and when we retaliate, we can really disrupt this industry.
And as far as I understand, it obviously produces the majority of these metals at the moment, but it's not the case that other countries don't have them completely. As I understand, it's that these countries don't have the kind of processing capability yet, or the refining capability. So given that we have these new restrictions now, how are other countries, do you think, going to respond? And is there potential for other countries to make up the difference, as it were, now that we have these restrictions on the metals coming out of China?
Yeah, countries that are now obviously looking for alternative solutions other than import from China, but it would still take time for countries either to discover this type of rare earth minerals or to find ways that could substitute this type of minerals. But I know for a fact that companies like TSMC still have ways to get hold of this type of minerals, because it is important that TSMC with their fabs in China still continuously producing the chips that are important to be sold to China as well.
I'm glad you mentioned Taiwan there, because I want to take a look at the bigger picture now. Of course, as you mentioned, China's move is widely seen as part of this battle to control the supply of chips, the brains of modern electronics. Beijing's restrictions follow sweeping US export controls, as you mentioned as well, unveiled last year, targeting China's chip industry. But Beijing insists, of course, that its recent measures are not a retaliation in response to those measures. This was from China's foreign ministry just after the controls were announced.
我想说的是，中国始终致力于维护全球产供链的安全稳定，始终执行公正、合理、非歧视的出口管制措施。中国政府依法对相关物项实施出口管制，是国际的通行做法，不针对任何特定的国家。
Despite what we saw there from the Chinese foreign ministry, most do think these restrictions constitute a retaliation to the US export controls unveiled last year. Just walk us through what those export controls look like and the significance of the US measures that were unveiled last year as well.
So Biden administration launched a series of sweeping export control in October last year, targeting at China's capabilities to produce high-end chips. So basically, U.S. government banned any companies to export machineries or chips that is higher than 14 nanometers to be shipped or export to China. And not only that, U.S. government also banned U.S. persons, that is anyone with a U.S. citizenship or U.S. passport to work in R&D positions in Chinese chip makers. So this, in a way that not only they restrict you from getting hold of the machines that are needed for manufacturing those chips, but they are also restricting engineers to work for the Chinese chip industry.
And how do these two sets of restrictions compare? Do you think they're of an equal magnitude, or do you think, which country do you think has the more powerful hand here? Which do you think is going to be more inhibited, developing their domestic chip industry as a result of the others' restrictions?
So China, by issuing such a countermeasure to the U.S., is a signal to the U.S. that it is interested in establishing a new bilateral dialogue on export controls. So the latest move could provide Beijing with more leverage in the coming discussions with Washington. And the timing that this type of measures were released, which is days prior to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit to Beijing, was also a way to tell U.S. is that we could do something to make you look bad, to make you wanting to talk to us. So it in a way that we will see a escalation of more type of restrictions imposed on both sides that would eventually make the global supply chain more fragmented and decoupled. And while U.S. is now promoting the concept of de-risking, this type of so-called bilateral export controls, would that be counterproductive? I think that's something that we must pay attention to.
And as you mentioned near the top of the show, a lot of the kind of motivation for this, both from the US and the Chinese side, is national security. That's what's driving a lot of these new restrictions. Sometimes national security imperatives, of course, fly in the face of economic sense and business sense. So whether that's in the US or China, have you seen any pushback from within the business community, within industry in either of those countries to their own governments' implementation of these restrictions?
Yeah, obviously, this type of export controls impact is far-reaching. Take U.S. Chip firm NVIDIA, for example. The loss of the export control ban on its chips to China is 2% of its annual revenue, which arguably is small for a company, but it will increase gradually or exponentially if the export control continues to accentuate. And not only that, it would also impact the manufacturer of the chips and other type of supply chain, upstream, downstream companies. So you cannot say that the impact is only limited to the two countries. It's actually going to be far-reaching and all-encompassing.
And then just a final question on Taiwan's chip industry. Do you think Taiwan's chip manufacturing industry is going to get caught in the crossfire between these two sets of restrictions?
As far as I know, that TSMC has announced that the rare earth mineral restrictions don't have that much of impact on its current business. But I think this would have a spillover effect if China continues to impose more restrictions, retaliating U.S. and U.S. also retaliate. This tit for tat could go on for years, which would mean that the industry's outlook for the future would be much more uncertain and shaky. And as we know that semiconductor chips is an industry that require massive investment and long-term asset development and technology implementation. So this type of geopolitical risk and uncertainty will certainly pose a lot of destability and uncertainty towards the industry. So it means that the semiconductor industry will be continuously impacted by the geopolitical risks.
Thank you so much, Jason, for coming on today's show.
Thank you.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find TaiwanPlus on Facebook and Twitter. We'll see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.